Hi guys, this is Steve, and in this video we're going to learn how to use the lookup function. It's a very popular and useful function, and this is a great video on how to do it. By the way, this video is a guest post from Robin Davis, who is my co-instructor on Udemy, and this video is from her course, the Excel Lookup Functions Deep Dive on Udemy. It's an awesome course. If you want to check it out, the link is in the description. But without further ado, here's Robin to teach you about VLOOKUP.
Okay, let's dig into VLOOKUP. You've already seen what VLOOKUP can do in the coffee order examples in the previous section, but now I'll walk you through how to create your very own VLOOKUP formula. This is a worksheet with a simple table which lists some dogs, the ID number assigned to those dogs, what breed they are, and their owner's name. What I want to do over here is add a VLOOKUP formula so that when I type in a dog's name in this cell, its breed will populate in this cell. So in this example, the lookup value is the dog's name, and the return value is the dog's breed. Now remember that in order to use VLOOKUP, your data needs to be set up in a certain way because VLOOKUP is going to look vertically, hence the V in VLOOKUP, and once it finds what it's searching for, will travel to the right along that same row. Since the dog breed column is to the right of the dog names column, our table is set up properly to be able to use VLOOKUP. Since we want Excel to return the value or the dog's breed in this cell, this is where we'll type our formula. I'll use the formula bar so it's easier for you to see. There are 4 pieces of information or arguments that you will need in order to build a VLOOKUP formula. The lookup value, the table array, the column index number, and range lookup. I'm going to walk you through each one. The first argument we need to input is the lookup value. That is, what do we want Excel to look for? Well, in this example, we're asking Excel to look up the dog's name we type in this cell, so I'll click on that cell to add it to the formula. Now, we're using a cell reference in our formula, but what we input for the lookup value within our formula can be a number, some text, it can even include wildcards. But for now, we just want to search for the dog's name we type into cell C2. Next, Excel wants to know where it should look or where it should perform this search. This is called the table array. Our lookup values and our return values need to be in the table array. And remember that our lookup values are dogs' names and our return values are the dog's breeds. So I need to include both these columns in my table array. So I'm going to select this section for where I want Excel to search. Now, why am I selecting only this portion starting in column F and not including the ID column or column E? That's because, remember, when using VLOOKUP, it's first going to search vertically, and then it's going to look to the right. So I need to make sure that the first column of my table array is the column I want Excel to search in. And since we're looking up dogs' names, I want that column to be the first column in our table array. If I instead included the ID column in our table array, our formula would first look vertically in the ID column, not find what it's looking for, and return an error. So it's very important to select the correct table array, in particular paying attention to the column in which your table array begins. Now, what about where it should end? Well, since VLOOKUP is going to look vertically and then to the right, you really only have to make sure that your return values are included in the table array. But our table array can actually stretch way beyond where you need it to because the moment Excel finds the return value, it'll disregard everything beyond it. Next up in our formula is the column index number. This is simply asking, in which column within our table array do the return values reside? Let's take a look at our table array. The values we want returned, or the dog's breed, are in the second column of our table array. Now, in this table, the dog breed column is the third column, but that's not what Excel is asking for here. It's asking where is it in the table array that we selected. It's in the second column, so we're going to put 2 here. The next parameter is called range lookup. And it's asking whether we'd like an exact match or an approximate match. Later in this section, I'll talk more about exact and approximate matches, But for now, just know that you have to type in false if you want to search for an exact match, and true to search for an approximate match. Exact match means that you want Excel to search for the lookup value exactly how you've entered it. And since we want an exact match to our dog names, we're going to input false here. I'd say that the majority of the times you're using VLOOKUP, you're going to want an exact match, so get used to typing in false as the last argument. But again, more on that later. I'll close my parentheses and hit return, and see that my VLOOKUP formula is working as expected. It searched for the dog's name Lucky and returned Bulldog as Lucky's breed. Let's walk through this formula one more time to understand the steps involved. Our formula first checked the cell we input as our lookup value. Then it went to the table array we selected and searched down the first column of our table array until it found the lookup value. Then it traveled to the right along the same row and stopped at the second column, which is where we specified the return values reside. It then returned the value it found in the cell where we input our VLOOKUP formula. I'll show you one more example. I want to use VLOOKUP to look up the coffee items in this column and return the coffee prices in this column based off the information that's in this table. Since I want the return values to populate in this column, I'll input a VLOOKUP formula into this cell and will copy it down to the remaining cells. Okay, let's build our formula. As a beginner, when you're creating a VLOOKUP formula that will be copied to other rows, it's helpful to focus on just the first row until you know that your formula works. So we're going to pretend that the rest of this table doesn't exist at the moment and just focus on this row for now. We'll start with VLOOKUP. And our lookup value is what's typed in this cell, so I'll click it to add it to my formula. Next is the table array, and remember here we're telling Excel where it should perform its search, and we need to begin the table array at the column that has our lookup values and extend it to at least include our return values. Next, Excel wants to know what column it should return, and within our table array, this time our return values, or the prices, are in column 3. We want an exact match to our lookup values, so I'll enter false here. Now let's verify that our formula returned the correct price. It's telling me that a mocha is $3.55, and when I reference the menu, I see that it is correct. So I know my formula works. So now let's make a small tweak to our formula so that it'll work with the remaining cells and not just this one. And I'll go over the hows and whys in depth in a later lecture, but for now just know that you need to add $signs before the row and column identifiers in your table array if you'll be copying your formula to other cells. This tells Excel that you don't want your table array to move when you copy your formula down to other cells. Once you're more comfortable writing VLOOKUP formulas, you can add the $signs as you're creating the formula, and I'll show you an easy way to do that in a later lecture. Now that we've added the $signs, I'll copy the formula down, and we see that Excel has added the prices to all our coffee items. Before we go, I'll talk quickly about the lookup value argument. We used cell references in the previous examples, but you can also hard code the lookup value directly in the formula. Here I'm adding the dog name in the formula itself. And since this is text, it's important to remember to surround it in quotes. And you see that we get the correct result. If your lookup value is a number, you can leave the quotes off, like in this example. And keep in mind, this holds true for all lookup functions. In the course, I'll be using cell references for all the remaining examples, but I wanted to point out that you can, in fact, just hard code your lookup value if you'd like. Well, congratulations on finishing the first major and arguably most important lecture of the course. I encourage you to practice using VLOOKUP. Get comfortable with the examples we went over in this lecture, complete the exercises, and work on recreating the formulas that were used before moving on to the next lecture. This will give you a good foundation for the rest of the course where you'll be learning even more about VLOOKUP and also be introduced to other useful lookup functions.
Well, I hope that gives you a sense of what lookup functions can do for you. If you want to learn more, check out the link in the description and watch some of the preview videos in Robin's course on Udemy.